The scene of the Israelite encampment must have been incredible. East of the Jordan River, a vast crowd gathered in the plains of Moab, gazing across the water at the monumental task ahead. God had multiplied their numbers and established laws to govern their conduct and worship. This fulfilled his ancient promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to make them into a great nation. Now, after about 40 years in the wilderness, God was about to lead Israel into the land he had promised to give them. Imagine their excitement and nervousness as they anticipated what lay ahead. But to move forward successfully, they first needed to learn from the past. The books of Genesis and Exodus reveal to Israel who their God is. He is a loving God who is trustworthy to uphold his promises, even when his people are unfaithful. One of the Hebrew words used to describe his character is Chesed, which expresses God's steadfast, ever-faithful, and promise-keeping love toward his people. Leviticus further showed them what it means to live as God's people, set apart to be his priestly witness to the nations. Numbers builds on this foundation. It begins with a census of their parents' generation who came out of Egypt. This census ordered Israel's identity around the presence of Yahweh. The first 10 chapters sought to form that generation into a people who faithfully respond to every word that comes from his mouth. In this way, they were to reflect God's holiness to every nation around them. However, beginning in chapter 11, a tragic pattern emerges. When difficulties arose, the true state of their hearts was exposed. Despite all that they had experienced with God, from his deliverance from Egypt to his visible presence dwelling among them in his tabernacle, the generation who came out of Egypt revealed a deeper unbelief in God's ability to do for them what he had promised. This distrust began among some on the outer edges of their camp, but it didn't stop there. Over the following chapters, distrust in God spread inward through the camp like a toxin. As it took hold, even key leaders failed to trust God, leading the whole congregation to turn away from his call to take the land he had promised them. The infection encroached further into the camp, reaching some of the Levites who were set apart by God to be the guardians and caretakers of the tabernacle. Finally, and most shockingly, the ones closest to God's presence, Aaron and Moses themselves, failed to trust God, compromising their calling to be conduits of his holiness. The toxin of distrust had spread through the entire camp, poisoning it all the way to its core. The colossal task of entering and settling the land God promised was going to be difficult. Well-fortified cities and formidable armies stood in their way. For this next generation to succeed, they had to trust and obey God completely. Despite God's chesed, his steadfast love, the first generation proved themselves unfit for this mission. But the next generation, the original readers of Numbers, were different. Raised in the wilderness, this generation had only known a life of total reliance on God, trusting him for their daily bread and their very survival. Because of this dependence, God chose them to enter the Promised Land. In chapter 26, a new census marks this transition. With the second generation now numbered, the process of preparing Israel for its calling begins again. For this new generation, Numbers serves as a lesson and a warning. Do not distrust the character of God as your parents did. But, while they held the responsibility of entering the Promised Land, they were not expected to conquer and inhabit the whole land all at once. In Exodus 23 and Deuteronomy 7, God made clear that he would drive out their enemies little by little. In this way, Numbers also commissions every future generation to learn from past failures. By following the Lord wholeheartedly, even through difficulty, they can finally inherit the blessings they were created to enjoy. The numbers effect means learning from the mistakes of the past. Like the Israelites, we too will walk through difficult circumstances that may lead us to doubt the goodness and steadfast love of God. However, like Caleb and Joshua, we must orient our lives with God at the very center. When we live this way, we will receive everything we need to carry out the mission He has called us to do.
If you found this video helpful, please do like and subscribe, as it allows us to reach more people. Our videos are made possible by donations from viewers like you. If you would like to donate, please do follow the link in the description below. And thank you so much for watching.